Nick Jain, you are the CEO of Idea Scale, found on the web at ideascale.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yes, I enjoyed our pre-conversation, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. We've talked a little bit about change, just to make a plug for that and how hard and scary and fun and exciting it can be. But before we get into that, can you kind of tell me high level about Idea Scale and how it found you or you found it?
Sure, they found me actually, but what Idea Scale is, we've been around 15 years. We are a software company that makes innovation or idea management software. What that means is think of us like a social network for ideas. So on TikTok, you're posting videos of people dancing or your cats or your kids. On Idea Scale, we're a social network where people post ideas and other people around your network vote on those ideas. They comment on those ideas. They iterate on those ideas. And those ideas could be something as silly as what snacks should you have in your company office to, how do you design a robotic part for a spaceship that goes to Mars. Our clients are some of the largest organizations in the world: Pfizer, US Post Office, Comcast, ING Bank, these extraordinary organizations that they want to figure out what the great ideas that their customers and employees have, and then to figure out the best of the best ideas and turn them into reality. And we're really excited about being, the software that empowers them to do so.
Can you talk about one of these ideas? Because we've all been, I'm gonna tell a little story first, but we've all been in corporate. I spent over 20 years there, and we all have these ideas and we all want to like figure out how to elevate them and figure out could they work, or is it just another idea that I need to throw in the back of the drawer? Do you have one example that kind of comes to mind? Because God knows I have like thrown some crazy ideas out there and some of them stuck and we were like, wow, that worked. So give me a story of
Sure.
what you've got.
So, sometimes my customer data is private and I don't have the opportunity to peek into it, but I'll give an example of a public campaign that one of our customers ran with. One of the biggest fast food companies in the world, someplace you've probably been in the past month. They have all these professional chefs, and their professional chefs were running out of ideas for what their new menu item should be. So they said, hey, wait, let's just go ask our customers. So they came to Idea Scale and started a public campaign where they were asking their billions of customers around. There were billions with a B. Hey, what should be on our new menu? Do you want a burger? Do you want a taco? Do you want a chicken sandwich? Do you want a new type of ice cream? And so people from around the world contributed ideas for, hey, guys should be making a salsa burger. I'm making this up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And other people who, even if they didn't have ideas, they said, nah, Catherine's idea is kind of like too spicy. I don't like it. I'm going to downvote it. But hey, wait, John's idea over there, great. Let's vote that up. And so this big restaurant company had all these thousands of ideas from so many people around the world, representing different cultures, different taste palettes. And then they figured out which of these ideas are the best. And then they actually took one of those ideas on the menu. And by best, I mean, obviously it has to be attractive to customers, but it also has to be practical and safe and all the stuff that goes into making it useful to restaurant industry, right? Like a fast food chain, everybody may want filet mignon steak, but a fast food chain is probably not the right place to put that. Whereas, conversely, a slushie may also not be the right thing for a fast food chain.
That's awesome. That's fun. And it is so basic and so vital for businesses to continue to go back and just flat out ask the customer, what do they want? And then obviously the next question, is it safe? Is it profitable? Is it something that's mutually beneficial? Can we create a double win here for everybody? And it's so basic and so important just to ask the customer, what do you guys need? What do you want to see?
And not just the customer, by the way, like a lot of our clients actually use it to talk to their employees because, as you said, kind of one of the difficult things in any large organization is a lot of people have good ideas, but it's difficult for them to be heard, right? You're not everyone is walking by the CEO's desk every morning, or you may be sitting in a different country, different office, different time zone, right? So how do you make sure that the good ideas get collected and then percolate up and actually get executed by those who have decision-making authority within your organization, whether that be corporate or public sector?
Yeah, I think sponsorship is important for that. You've got to have proper sponsorship for your own career and for your own, just benefit of the company. If you've got good sponsorship, you've got good collaboration, you can help vet some of these ideas a little bit quicker than what you could have done if it was just you working by yourself. So I know working in corporate and just working with other people in the community, we can do so much more when we're collaborating together on these ideas and bringing them back, operationally also to make sure that they're functional too is important to it. So tell me a little bit about, I love this question. Why do you think businesses are struggling to innovate and to come up with these ideas?
I think two things are happening kind of consistently over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Number one, organizations have gotten bigger. If you're 5 people in a room, then it's a lot easier to innovate than if you're 1,000 people, right? If you look at the mega corporations of the 1940s or 50s, they were a few hundred or a few thousand people. The mega corporations, or it doesn't be corporations, the mega public sector organizations, nonprofits, today are thousands of people spread across different time zones, languages. You may not even speak the same language as some of your colleagues. And that makes it a lot more difficult for people to collaborate because they're not sitting, it's not a small team sitting in the same room with the same whiteboard, speaking the same language with the same cultural context. Mm-hmm. That's hard, right? You have a much more complex, larger, in some cases, bureaucratic structures that you're operating in. Secondly, is that domain expertise has become diffused. What that means is like once upon a time, you could have one really smart person who just knows a lot, right? And whereas today, a little bit of knowledge lies in everybody's heads. And you actually need to bring it together in order to have something useful. And I'll provide, my background is in like theoretical physics. And once upon, there was this era where you had the Einsteins and the Newtons, these, individual geniuses who knew everything and could innovate in modern fields. But if you look at modern science, it's all collaborative because no one person knows enough about what is going on in our universe to single-handedly come up with the great ideas. And that's true in the business world as well. You need your account managers who are talking to your customers, but then you need your scientists who actually understand what's possible. You need your finance team to figure out, is this a good business decision? You may need politicians to figure out, hey, is this actually good for the public? And you need that greater collaboration because the information that is necessary to innovate has become so diffuse versus 10, 20, 50 years ago.
I couldn't agree more. I'm having flashbacks of a few things that we've been able to create, and it's because we brought people together. We understood what was possible operationally, or as you said, with the scientists, to be able to make it what's possible because they can make or break it for you, and they only have so many hours and so many resources, and all we do is like keep loading up the scientists, keep loading up the engineering, keep loading up the operations, and you're like, oh, I guess that cup of coffee I bought them wasn't really a good trade-off because they're working like 80 hours and they got no life. I feel horrible for them. But, we got to be able to create some prioritization for them because they're getting all these ideas. But then you got to bring in finance because you got to figure out what's even possible of what can we pay for this? Is there an ROI? It sounds really cool, but can we bring it to market?
Right. Sending spaceships to Mars sounds cool. It may not actually be the best business decision, right? Mm-hmm. Unless we think a meteor is coming and going to wipe us out, in which case it's the greatest decision ever.
Yeah. Then my brain starts going into, okay, we got to have food, we got to have supplies, we got to have like all this infrastructure. So, and then the expense just kind of goes crazy. So, yeah, I think you're right. Everything. I think a lot of people, we think of how it used to be, or we were raised by people who had it a certain way where we had one person who had all the knowledge, and that just no longer exists. And so we're literally changing mindsets, and we're changing the culture of it's not one person in one office who's got it all. It's exactly what you're saying. It's collaboration. It's bringing people in. Everybody has 10% of the knowledge of the puzzle to be able to bring it in and make it happen. So I think you're exactly right. And it is easier when they're smaller and the culture is in alignment, and to be able to grow. How do you grow? What are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you have some of these companies that are just creating great results, but they're continuing to grow? But then what is that transition like for ideas and collaboration? Like, have you seen anything that's worked really well with fast growing companies?
Sure. So I'll give an example that I'm actually going to steal from Amazon. They have or used to have. I'm not sure if they still do this thing called the two pizza rule, that
Mm.
no team should be big enough that it should require more than two pizzas to feed them. Because once you have such a big team, stuff slows down. There's a lot of communication loss. So anybody at Amazon, once upon a time, again, it may have changed. Teams needed to be small enough that two full pizzas could feed them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that. So that's number one, right? Even within large organizations, if you look at some of the mega organizations, both public and private sector, the really effective ones have created small, lean teams that combine kind of fast moving, intelligent, well-meaning, well-motivated people with a diversity of experiences and expertises, right? And sometimes that expertise can be kind of odd, and yet nonetheless that leads to really cool insights. So that's number one, like create small teams. Number two is reward excellence. I think a lot of organizations struggle with rewarding excellence, right? You have a superstar employee, he or she may be 22. They're coming up with great ideas, but what's their path forward? It's like, okay, every 2 years they get a promotion, they got to work their way up. That nobody really cares. And you don't want to demotivate those people or kind of beat the innovation or creativity out of them. And a lot of organizations unintentionally do that because they're so focused on the hierarchy of how their organization works, which again is not unimportant, but at the cost of inculcating a culture where excellence and innovation and creativity thrive.
I love that. So as these folks are growing, let's talk about the efficiencies, because sometimes the efficiencies can be lost because they're beginning to grow and expand. How do some of these businesses become more efficient in what they're doing as they're growing?
You are going to lose some efficiency as you grow, right? The communication costs grow as a function of like, what is it? N squared as a network grows, or N to the N, I forget. But no matter how, as you grow bigger, you will lose information. You will spend more time in meetings and bureaucracy. You have more managers who are just managing managers who are themselves managing managers. You do lose that. But what you gain is the ability you gain two things along the way. Number one, large organizations tend to have a lot of resources. Okay, so you can actually go pursue great things, right? If you want to build a semiconductor fab that costs $3 billion today, no 10-person startup, no matter how intelligent they are, is going to be able to put out $3 billion to build a semiconductor fabrication. There's like 6 companies in the world that do it because you need a lot of resources. Number two, and not just money resources, but people resources, right? If Intel or TSMC, which are two great semiconductor companies, they want the world's expert on 3 nanometer 3D printing, there's someone at their organization that has that, whereas a 10-person semiconductor startup may not have that access to that person. The second thing is you can you can approach more complex problems. Even aside from resources, you have the ability to approach more complex problems, and that those complex problems can create a lot of value for the world. So what large organizations give up by becoming bigger is they gain more resources and more ability to pursue complex problems. And those complex problems, at least in the private sector, sometimes generate a lot of value. And a good example of that recently is the Chat GPTs and Geminis, right? To create an AI chatbot is actually really, really complex. And it's a problem that most organizations can't approach unless you can get 1,000 people who are experts in mathematics, linear algebra, GPU computing, cloud deployment, and parallel processing, get them all together and say, we're going to solve this problem that no one else has the 1,000 best people in the world to go do. So,
what are your thoughts on corporate with the Chat GPT solution, the Gemini and all that's out there? And then you've got the smaller companies that are more agile, that are able to maybe leverage it. I'm working with different companies today, and I'm seeing it, but I'm curious about your thoughts on how does corporate keep up with the agility that seems to be available for maybe the smaller. Maybe there's a smaller advantage. I don't know. What do you think?
The short answer is, and I'll rely on the research here. The research shows that large organizations can't keep up with the agility of small organizations. So what they do is typically they've approached 2 strategies. Number one, they just buy the small organizations. So that's why a lot of large organizations tend to have what are they call corporate venture arms or M&A arms or corp dev teams. When they see someone doing something really cool, they're like, hey, we got a lot of money. You're small. Let's buy you. And so they buy innovation, or they buy creativity, or they buy other companies. That's method number one. Method number two is they try and incubate startups within their own organization. And that is more of a mixed history in terms of being effective, because how do you create an organization that is still like a mini organization that is still accountable through the chain of command of your larger organization, but has enough independence to move fast and break things? There's more of a mixed history on that. And it's only about 10 or so years ago that these sorts of they call them intrapreneur organizations started existing. So we don't know yet, but really, like, large organizations, they tend to just buy smaller organizations because they've struggled to be as nimble or agile.
Do you think the chat GPT, or do you think that Gemini is going to help corporate more or help the smaller guy more? Do you think that's going to accelerate the smaller guy quicker? I'm just wondering about some of that automation as far as efficiencies and things like that could be available that might get clogged up in the bigger org.
Sure. So there's three types of AI that are